Coptic. A Coptic Egyptian is the latest stage of the Egyptian language, a northern Afroasiatic language spoken in Egypt until at least the 17th century. Egyptian began to be written in the Coptic alphabet, an adaptation of the Greek alphabet with the addition of 6 or 7 signs from Demotic to represent Egyptian sounds the Greek language did not have. In the 1st century AD, several distinct Coptic dialects are identified, the most prominent of which are Sahidic, originating in parts of Upper Egypt, and Bohairic, originally from the western Nile Delta in Lower Egypt. Coptic and Demotic are grammatically closely related to late Egyptian, which was written with Egyptian hieroglyphs. Coptic flourished as a literary language from the 2nd to 13th centuries, and its Bohairic dialect continues to be the liturgical language of the Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria. It was supplanted by Egyptian Arabic as a spoken language toward the early modern period, but language revitalization efforts have been underway since the 19th century. Name: the native Coptic name for the language is Timtriman Kemi in the Bohairic dialect, at Mentriman Kemi in the Sahidic dialect. The particle prefix met from the verb muti forms all abstract nouns in Coptic. The term Remenkemi, meaning Egyptian, literally person of Egypt, is a compound of rem, which is the construct state of the Coptic noun man, human being, plus the genitive preposition en, of, plus the word for Egypt, kemi, kem. Thus, the whole expression literally means language of the people of Egypt, or simply Egyptian language. Another name by which the language has been called is Dementaption, from the Copto-Greek form Dementigoption. The term logos and agoptios is also attested in Sahidic, but logos and agoptios are both Greek in origin. In the liturgy of the Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria, the name is more officially T-Aspi and Remenkemi, the Egyptian language, Aspi being the Egyptian word for language. Geographic distribution. Coptic is today spoken liturgically in the Coptic Orthodox and Coptic Catholic Church. The language is spoken only in Egypt and historically has had little influence outside of the territory, except for monasteries located in Nubia. Coptic's most noticeable linguistic impact has been on the various dialects of Egyptian Arabic, which is characterized by Coptic substratum in lexical, morphological, syntactical, and phonological features. Influence on other languages. In addition to influencing the grammar, vocabulary and syntax of Egyptian Arabic, Coptic has lent to both Arabic and Biblical Hebrew such words as timsah, crocodile, emsa. This subsequently entered Turkish's timsah. It should be noted, however, that Coptic is grammatically masculine and hence would have been vocalized pemsa or bemsa. Hence it is unclear why the word should have entered Arabic with an initial T, which would have required the word to be grammatically feminine. Tuba, brick, Sahidic to be, Bohairic to by. This subsequently entered Catalan and Spanish's Tova and Adobe respectively, the latter of which was borrowed by American English. Wafa, oasis, Sahidic Wahe, Bohairic Wehi. A few words of Coptic origin are found in the Greek language. Some of the words were later lent to various European languages. However, most words of Egyptian origin that entered into Greek and subsequently into other European languages came directly from ancient Egyptian, often Demotic. An example is the Greek alpha sigma iota sigma oasis, which comes directly from Egyptian wh3 t Demotic whi. However, Coptic reborrowed some words of ancient Egyptian origin into its lexicon via Greek. For example, both Sahidic and Bohairic use the word ebonos, which was taken directly from Greek beta epsilon nu omicron sigma ebony, originally from Egyptian hbny. The Coptic name, Papnute, means the of God. It was adapted into Arabic as Babnuda, which remains a common name among among Egyptian Copts to this day. It was also borrowed into Greek as the name Pi Alpha Phi Nu Omicron Upsilon Tau Iota Omicron Sigma. That, in turn, is the source of the Russian name, like the mathematician Pafnuty Chebyshev. The Old Nubian language and the modern Obian language borrowed many words of Coptic origin. History. The Egyptian language may have the longest documented history of any language, from Old Egyptian that appeared just before 3200 BC to its final phases as Coptic in the Middle Ages. Coptic belongs to the later Egyptian phase, which started to be written in the New Kingdom of Egypt. Later Egyptian represented colloquial speech of the later periods. It had analytic features like definite and indefinite articles and periphrastic verb conjugation. Coptic, therefore, is a reference to both the most recent stage of Egyptian after Demotic and the new writing system that was adapted from the Greek alphabet. Pre-Islamic period. The earliest attempts to write the Egyptian language using the Greek alphabet are Greek transcriptions of Egyptian proper names, most of which date to the Ptolemaic period. Scholars frequently refer to this phase as pre-Coptic. However, it is clear that by the late Pharaonic period, Demotic scribes regularly employed a more phonetic orthography, a testament to the increasing cultural contact between Egyptians and Greeks even before Alexander the Great's conquest of Egypt. Coptic itself, or Old Coptic, takes root in the 1st century. The transition from the older Egyptian scripts to the newly adapted Coptic alphabet was in part due to the decline of the traditional role played by the priestly class of ancient Egyptian religion, who, unlike most ordinary Egyptians, were literate in the temple scriptoria. Old Coptic is represented mostly by non-Christian texts such as Egyptian pagan prayers and magical and astrological papyri. Many of them served as glosses to original hieratic and demotic equivalents. The glosses may have been aimed at non-Egyptian speakers. Under late Roman rule, Diocletian persecuted many Egyptian converts to the new Christian faith, which forced new converts to flee to the Egyptian deserts. In time, the growth of these communities generated the need to write Christian Greek instructions in the Egyptian language. The early fathers of the Egyptian Church, such as Antony the Great, Pachomius the Great, Macarius of Egypt and Athanasius of Alexandria, who otherwise usually wrote in Greek, addressed some of the works to the Egyptian monks in Egyptian. The Egyptian language, now written in the Coptic alphabet, flourished in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. However, it was not until Shenute that Coptic became a fully standardized literary language based on the Sahidic dialect. Shenuda's native Egyptian tongue and knowledge of Greek and rhetoric gave him the necessary tools to elevate Coptic, in content and style, to a literary height nearly equal to the position of the Egyptian language in ancient Egypt. Islamic period. The Muslim conquest of Egypt by Arabs came with the spread of Islam in the 7th century. At the turn of the 8th century, Caliph Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan decreed that Arabic replace Con-Greek and Coptic as the sole administrative language. Literary Coptic gradually declined, and within a few hundred years, Egyptian bishop Severus ibn al-Muqaffa found it necessary to write his History of the Patriarchs in Arabic. However, the language ecclesiastically retained its important position, and many hagiographic texts were also composed during this period. Until the 10th century, Coptic remained the spoken language of the native population outside the capital. Persecutions under the Mamluk Sultanate led to the further decline of Coptic until it completely gave way to Egyptian Arabic around the 17th century. Though it may have survived in isolated pockets for a little longer, in the second half of the 19th century, Pope Cyril IV of Alexandria started a national church-sponsored movement to revive Coptic. Several works of grammar were published, along with a more comprehensive dictionary than had been previously available. The scholarly findings of the field of Egyptology and the inauguration of the Institute of Coptic Studies further contributed to the Renaissance. Efforts at language revitalization continue to be undertaken, both inside and outside the Church, and have attracted the interest of Copts and linguists in and outside of Egypt. Writing system. Main article Coptic alphabet. Coptic uses a writing system almost wholly derived from the Greek alphabet, with the addition of a number of letters that have their origins in Demotic Egyptian. There is some variation in the number and forms of these signs depending on the dialect. Some of the letters in the Coptic alphabet that are of Greek origin were normally reserved for words that are themselves Greek. Old Coptic texts employed several graphemes that were not retained in the literary Coptic orthography of later centuries. In Sahidic, syllable boundary may have been marked by a supralinear stroke. Such words in the northern dialects have in place of the superlinear stroke. Some scribal traditions use a diaresis over I and U at the beginning of a syllable. Bohairic uses a superposed point, a small stroke known as a jinkum. It may be related to the Sahidic supralinear stroke, or it may indicate a glottal stop. Most Coptic texts do not indicate a word division. Vocabulary. The core lexicon of Coptic is Egyptian, most closely related to the preceding Demotic phase of the language. Up to 20% of the vocabulary of literary Coptic is drawn from Greek, but borrowings are not always fully adapted to the Coptic phonological system and may have semantic differences as well. There are instances of Coptic texts having passages that are almost entirely composed from Greek lexical roots. However, that is likely due to the fact that the majority of Coptic religious texts are direct translations of Greek works. What invariably attracts the attention of the reader of a Coptic text, especially if it is written in the Sahidic dialect, is the very liberal use which is made of Greek loanwords, of which so few, indeed, are to be found in the ancient Egyptian language. The Greek loanwords occur everywhere in Coptic literature, be it biblical, liturgical, theological, or non-literary, i.e., legal documents and personal letters. Though nouns and verbs predominate, the Greek loanwords may come from any other part of speech except pronouns. Words or concepts for which no adequate Egyptian translation existed were taken directly from Greek to avoid altering the meaning of the religious message. In addition, other Egyptian words that would have adequately translated the Greek equivalents were not employed as they were perceived as having overt pagan associations. Old Coptic texts employ many such words, phrases and epithets. For example, the word in mountain is an epithet of Anubis. There are also traces of some archaic grammatical features, such as residues of the Demotic relative clause, lack of an indefinite article and possessive use of suffixes. Thus, the transition from the old traditions to the new Christian religion also contributed to the adoption of Greek words into the Coptic religious lexicon. It is safe to assume that the everyday speech of the native population retained, to a greater extent, its indigenous Egyptian character, which is sometimes reflected in Coptic non-religious documents such as letters and contracts. Phonology. Coptic provides the clearest indication of later Egyptian phonology from its writing system, which fully indicates vowel sounds and occasionally stress pattern. The phonological system of later Egyptian is also better known than that of the classical phase of the language because of a greater number of sources indicating Egyptian sounds, including cuneiform letters containing transcriptions of Egyptian words and phrases, and Egyptian renderings of Northwest Semitic names. Coptic sounds, in addition, are known from a variety of Coptic Arabic papyri in which Arabic letters were used to transcribe Coptic and vice versa. They date to the medieval Islamic period, when Coptic was still spoken. Vowels. There are some differences of opinion among Coptic language scholars on the correct phonetic interpretation of the writing system of Coptic. Differences center on how to interpret the pairs of letters epsilon, eta and omicron, omega. In Greek spelling, the first member of each pair is a short closed vowel e, o, and the second member is a long open vowel. In some interpretations of Coptic phonology, it is assumed that the length difference is primary, with epsilon, eta e and omicron, omega is o. Other scholars argue for a different analysis in which epsilon, eta and omicron, omega are interpreted as e and o. These two charts show the two theories of Coptic vowel phonology. In the Upper Egyptian dialects, a superlinear stroke is placed over sonants to mark a reduced e. The vowel does not undergo reduction in the northern dialects, where it is indicated by in Bohairic or in Infinitebistromathics. For example, me, to worship, is shaklyc, Bohairic and Infinitebistromathic. The vowel quality of e can vary, either depending on the dialect. In Sahidic and other Upper Egyptian dialects, word final corresponds to word final in the northern dialects. The vowel is typically represented by, and its presence may be an indicator of emphasis spread in the same syllable. For example, is transcribed s in medieval Coptic Arabic papyri. In some phonetic environments, o is a more open and a is a more forward. The vowel e is always unstressed and can be reduced to zero, as in earlier Egyptian scripts, which did not indicate unstressed and most stressed vowels. Coptic also has 3 to 4 diphthongs, but they may be interpreted as series of vowels and glides. In some dialects, they are monophthongized consonants. As with the vowels, there are differences of opinion over the correct interpretation of the Coptic consonant letters, particularly the letters, and is transcribed as j in many older Coptic sources and as ct. Lambden notes that the current conventional pronunciations are different from the probable ancient pronunciations. Was probably pronounced and was probably pronounced. Riantjes suggests that was pronounced. The following chart shows the consonants that are represented in Sahidic Coptic orthography. Consonants that are rare are found primarily in Greek loanwords are shown in parentheses. Bohairic Coptic has an additional consonant x spell. It is possible that in the ancient pronunciation of Coptic that there were additional consonants not spelled in the writing system, such as earlier phases of Egyptian may have contrasted voiceless and voiced bilabial plosives, but the distinction seems to have been lost. Late Egyptian, Demotic and Coptic all interchangeably use the respective graphemes to indicate either sound. For example, Coptic for iron appears alternately as t and. That probably reflects dialect variation. Both letters were interchanged with and to indicate f, and was also used in many texts to indicate the bilabial approximant with. Coptologists believe that Coptic was articulated as a voiced bilabial fricative. In the present-day Coptic church services, this letter is realized as v, but it is almost certainly a result of the pronunciation reforms instituted in the 19th century, whereas Old Egyptian contrasts per second and z. The two sounds appear to be in free variation in Coptic, as they were since the Middle Egyptian period. However, they are contrasted only in Greek loans. For example, native Coptic and school are homophonous. Other consonants that sometimes appear to be either in free variation or to have different distributions across dialects are and and, with the voiceless stop consonants being more common in Coptic words and the voiced ones in Greek borrowings. Apart from the liquid consonants, this pattern may indicate a sound change in later Egyptian. leading to a neutralization of voiced alveolar and velar plosives. When the voiced plosives are realized, it is usually the result of consonant voicing in proximity to n. Old Coptic texts graphically expressed the Egyptian pharyngeals in a variety of ways. For example, the Old Coptic grapheme was occasionally used to convey a voiceless pharyngeal fricative. In literary Coptic, the two sounds are not indicated by separate letters, suggesting loss of phonemic status. Instead, the adapted Demotic grapheme, which normally stands for para, is used to express either sound. In unstressed initial syllables and stressed final syllables, the voiced pharyngeal fricative is sometimes conveyed by as in to multiply. Similarly, different methods are employed to graphically express the glottal stop, with word initially, with word finally, in monosyllabic words in northern dialects and in monosyllabic words in Acmimic and Asiatic, by reduplication of a vowels grapheme but mostly as grammar. Coptic has a subject-verb-object word order. There can be verb-subject-object with the correct preposition in front of the subject. Number, gender, tense, and mood are indicated by prefixes that come from late Egyptian. The earlier phases of Egyptian did this through suffixation. Some vestiges of the suffix inflection survive in Coptic, mainly to indicate inalienable possession and in some verbs. Compare the Middle Egyptian form sadapatha, he chooses, to Coptic f. sotp, he chooses. Nouns. All Coptic nouns carry grammatical gender, either masculine or feminine, usually marked through prefix definite article as in the Romance languages. Masculine nouns are marked with the article p, and feminine nouns with the article te. P-Romi, the man, te cij, the hand. The definite and indefinite articles also indicate number, however, only definite articles mark gender. Coptic has a number of broken plurals, a vestige of older Egyptian, but in the majority of cases, the article marks number. Generally, nouns inflected for plurality end in we, but there are some irregularities. The dual was another feature of earlier Egyptian that survives in Coptic in only few words, such as two. Words of Greek origin keep their original grammatical gender, except for neuter nouns, which become masculine in Coptic. Pronouns. Coptic pronouns are of two kinds, dependent and independent. Independent pronouns are used when the pronoun is acting in a true noun state, so it is the subject of a sentence, object of a verb, or indirect object of a verb, the object of a preposition. Dependent pronouns are a series of prefixes and suffixes that can attach to verbs and even other nouns. Coptic verbs can therefore be said to inflect for the person, number and gender of the subject. A pronoun subject is often not directly stated. Coptic verbs do not inflect at the end of a verb but at the beginning. Since Coptic has moved to being a subject-verb-object language, this creates an unusual effect of someone saying, I have at the ball. The pronoun prefix is for the subject and the pronoun suffix is usually for the object or indirect object. As in other Afroasiatic languages, gender of pronouns differ only in the second and third person singular. The following table shows the pronouns of the Sahidic dialect. Adjectives. Most Coptic adjectives are actually nouns that have the attributive particle n to make them adjectival. In all stages of Egyptian, this morpheme is also used to express the genitive. For example, the Bohairic word for Egyptian, remenkimi, is a combination of the nominal prefix rem, followed by the genitive morpheme n, and finally the word Egypt-kimi. Verbs. Verbal grade system. Coptic, like ancient Egyptian and Semitic languages, has root and pattern, a templatic morphology, and the basic meaning of a verb is contained in a root, and various derived forms of root are obtained by varying the vowel pattern. For example, the root for build is kt. It has four derived forms: kt, ket, got, equals, and kt. The absolute, nominal, and pronominal state grades are used in different syntactic contexts. The absolute state grade of a transitive verb is used before a direct object with the accusative preposition nm, and the nominal state grade is used before a direct object with no case marking. The pronominal state grade is used before a pronominal direct object enclitic. In addition, many verbs also have a neutral state grade, used to express a state resulting from the action of the verb. Compare the following forms: absolute state grade, nominal state grade, pronominal state grade for most transitive verbs. Both absolute and nominal state grade verbs are available for non-pronominal objects. However, there is one important restriction, known as Jernstedt's rule. Present tense sentences cannot be used in the nominal state grade. Thus, sentences in the present tense always show a pattern like the first example above, never the second pattern. In general, the four grades of Coptic verb are not predictable from the root, and are listed in the lexicon for each verb. The following chart shows some typical patterns of correspondence. It is hazardous to make firm generalizations about the relationships between these grade forms, but the nominal state is usually shorter than the corresponding absolute and neutral forms. Absolute and neutral state forms are usually bisyllabic or contain a long vowel. The corresponding nominal state forms are monosyllabic or have short vowels. Tense, aspect, mood, inflection. Coptic has a very large number of distinct tense, aspect, mood categories, expressed by particles which are either before the verb or before the subject. The future I now is a preverbal particle and follows the subject. In contrast, the perfective a is a pre-subject particle. There is some variation in the labels for the tense, aspect, mood categories. The chart below shows the labels from Rintjes, Lambden, Plumley. Each form lists the morphology found with a non-pronominal subject and a third-person singular masculine pronominal subject. An approximate range of use for most of the tense, aspect, mood categories is shown in the following table. Second tenses. An unusual feature of Coptic is the extensive use of a set of second tenses, which are acquired in certain syntactic contexts. Second tenses are also called relative tenses in some work. Prepositions. Coptic has prepositions, rather than postpositions, on the ship. Pronominal objects of prepositions are indicated with enclitic pronouns. Iro equals k, to you, na equals n, for use. Many prepositions have different forms before the enclitic pronouns. Compare epitoi, to the ship, iro equals f, to him. Syntax. Sentential syntax. Coptic typically shows subject-verb-object-word order, as in the following examples. The verbs in these sentences are in the absolute state grade, which requires that its direct object be introduced with the preposition nm. This preposition functions like accusative case. There is also an alternative nominal state grade of the verb in which the direct object of the verb follows with no preposition.